Welcome back to Wave Listens Live. And did you know over 7 million children and over 23 million adults in the United States are diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, with estimates suggesting that up to 50% of individuals are not receiving proper evaluation and treatment. Here to talk to us about this and give us some more education are several folks joining us now. First, we have Dr. Edward Hallowell, an ADHD medical expert, and we have Nancy Armstrong, who's the executive producer of The Disruptors, which is the first comprehensive documentary on ADHD. Thank you both for joining us here on Wave Listens Live and giving this information to our viewers in Louisville, Kentucky.
Thanks for having us.
Doctor, I want to start with you because as a leading medical expert on ADHD, can you shed some light on the prevalence of ADHD in both children and adults here in America?
Well, it's more common than most people think, and that's because we only diagnose the children and adults who are severely impaired, because that's what's required in the diagnostic manual. But if you include the rest of them, like me, did great in school, but I still had the condition, and I could have done better if I'd had that diagnosis. If you include us, then the number goes way up. You know, I think we're like 30% of the population or more. You know, we are the country of innovators. We're sort of the leaders of entrepreneurialism. Well, that's ADD. Most entrepreneurs have it, and so our gene pool is loaded for it. The people who came over here, you know, to start a new country. That's the ADD thing to do. Try the impossible. Have a big dream and pursue it and make it happen. That's ADD. So essentially the American dream is created and achieved by people who have this trait, this unusual condition that is so misunderstood by the people who need to understand it, like teachers and parents.
Well, Nancy, on that topic, is this part of what inspired you to create the film, The Disruptors? And then I know there's a new release PSA out there as well, The Upside of ADHD.
Yes, well, I raised 3 children with ADHD, and I figured out pretty quickly that this is a deeply misunderstood condition. So I wanted to create a film and a campaign that would cut through the confusion and the misinformation and the pervasive myths around ADHD by democratizing the best information from the top experts in the field, like Ned. We want parents and children to be liberated to understand that they're not alone and that there is an upside to ADHD. So it's fundamentally reframing this from the deficit disorder model, which is just wrong, to a brain type or a trait that has some challenges that need to be managed, but also comes with some pretty significant and impressive strengths.
Yeah, and on that topic, Dr. Hallowell, how has the understanding of this evolved over the years?
Well, 500 years ago, it existed, but was totally misunderstood. The diagnosis these kids, and adults for that matter, were given was bad, or lazy, or wayward, or possessed by the devil. So we've come a long way to 2023, where we realize it's a genetically transmitted, biologically based condition that is composed of positives and negatives. And the positives are the part most people don't know about. The creativity, the originality, the entrepreneurialism. We are starting to know about the negatives, which are problems with organization, being on time, you know, getting things done, and that sort of stuff. So we're at a point now where we know what we need to know. We just haven't disseminated it well to the people who really need to know, like parents and teachers, not to mention pediatricians. If they could understand what the condition actually is, that would remove the stigma and shame that surrounds it, and people who have it could begin to reach their full potential.
Yeah, Nancy, speaking of the stigma and somebody who's raised 3 kids who had ADHD, how do we do that? How do we remove the stigma?
Well, ADHD is a public health issue, but it's also one of the greatest engines for creativity in the world. So we need to educate not just parents and children, but all of society to understand that these are highly creative and imaginative people that will need a little more support as they grow up. Too often, children don't get the support they need, and they're demoralized by the time they get to high school because they've been blamed for something that is neurodevelopmental. So the truth is, if we can get them through to adulthood intact, they are the ones who oftentimes become our entrepreneurs, our innovators, our business leaders, our award-winning athletes and musicians. So we need to educate ourselves as a society and finally recognize that.
Yeah, and Dr. Hallowell, maybe the best way to help people understand is look at this in a different way. What would be some of the traits of somebody who doesn't have ADHD?
You mean someone who doesn't have it would have none of the advantages I enumerated and none of the disadvantages. So they'd be on time, they'd be well organized, they'd have what I call attention surplus disorder. They'd be your future bean counter, your future organizer of events, you know, the person who loves to create order, you know, and there are such people. Attention surplus disorder isn't an official condition, but I use that term to describe them. So they are the people who keep the trains running on time. They don't have particular flair, but we don't want everyone to have flair because we do want the trains to run on time.
Well, it's also interesting, and knowledge is power when it comes to this, and again, defeating the stigma. So last question I'd have for either of you is, where can our viewers go to learn more about all these great topics we discussed here today?
So you can learn more by going to upsideofadhd.org. You'll get resources and information there, and you can find the film, The Disruptors, at disruptorsfilm.com.
Dr. Edward Hallowell, ADHD medical expert, and Nancy Armstrong, executive producer of The Disruptors. We thank you both so much for joining us here on Listens Live today. And we'll be back with more after this short break.